So let's get started with what we normally get started with is which is the bloom calendar. Early in June here, and we're actually on the 13th now, and so we're halfway through what I have down for species in the bloom calendar, and there's some really interesting stuff out right now. But here's what we had looking forward in June. The American hollies and lavender and all of that came up. Poison ivy, crown vetch. All of these are not substantial blooms, but there are good sustainers, and bees work them. So it's worth mentioning them. Chinese privet is a big one that bees will work that like crazy. Smooth sumac is out right now, and it is just a extraordinary source of both nectar and pollen for bees, and it's all over where I am. Haven't seen it bloom this way in a long time. It's just absolutely gorgeous, upright blooms. And to follow that right away will be staghorn, which comes a couple days later. It's not quite out yet, and those are our 2 June sumacs, and they are important, I think, for us as beekeepers, because they're a great source of honey and nectar and pollen. The swamp milkweed will be out later. So milkweed, which is just always beautiful to watch. And if you get a chance this year and you haven't seen the way bees actually work milkweed, especially common milkweed or swamp milkweed or anything in the milkweed family, have a look at what they do. They have it's an incredible pollination strategy that the plant has, where the pollinariums have to come out of the flowers and inserted in other flowers. It's just, and you'll see them dangling off the bottoms of bees' legs. It's just one of those things. If you follow the natural order of blooms and you want to see something spectacular, you see how bees work milkweed. In addition to it smells has such a great fragrance, and it attracts every pollinator we have around. And of course, monarch butterflies. So Canada thistle, if your town hasn't eradicated that from its open fields, which is what happened here around where I am, it can be an incredible source for mid-June. But again, I don't see it anymore in the fields. They really did away with it, but it'll come back. Comes back on its own. Chicory's out. I mentioned staghorn, sumac, swamp milkweed. Dogbane is an appreciated sustaining bloom that will come out near the mid-3rd week or so in June, and will stay blooming all through June, July, and August. And I don't actually remember when it stops blooming at this point, but bees will work that all for the rest of the summer. Now, again, you won't make honey from it like you would black locust or something like that, which has a prolific amount of nectar coming out of it. But what it'll do is during the dearth, it'll sustain your colonies when they're living right on the edge there, when they're not actually getting a lot of nectar in. But plants like that, a variety of them, will sustain your colonies. And in Connecticut, for the most part, we're sustained by those kinds of blooms. And you see them right on here. Buckwheat, if it's out, dogbane, basswood comes out at the end of June, which can be a real catapult into July. Gary, would you mind mentioning what you were up against the last couple of days and what you did to mitigate it?
It was a great experience, but at the same time, I don't encourage or ask anyone to go through it like what my dad and I went through. And that was how to take care of a hot hive. By a hot hive, I mean one that's quite aggressive. Probably about a week and a half ago, I realized when I was mowing the yard and I saw a bunch of bees flying around, I automatically assumed, I'm like, oh man, I must have hit a yellow jacket hive. Let me turn around and go the other direction. Well, 2 days or 3 days ago at this point, I was doing it again, mowing the yard. And next thing you know, I notice I'm in the middle of these bees that are flying around frantically. I'm not talking, like orientation flights, right? Where they're doing their nice, gingerly, gentle figure skating activity. These guys were aggressive. I got stung 3 times in the cheek and once in the back as I'm riding away on my mower. And these guys followed me up to my garage, which is probably probably I'd say about 400 yards away. So there's quite a bit of distance. Next thing you know, I hear my neighbor yelling because they got stung twice. Their daughter got stung. So at this point, I'm like, oh, I know exactly what's going on here. I've heard about these stories about hot hives and about how bad and aggressive they can be. Well, what I did is I ended up calling up Bill, and I'm like, hey, Bill, listen, I told him the situation, and Bill's like, listen, this is what you do. And the advice he gave me, first off, how to identify, because I've got 15 hives basically in a row that goes about 75 feet long. I had an idea what hive it could have been. It was one of 2. So Bill's like, listen, go out there, bang on the hive and stand around the corner and hold a black, a black towel, black sweatshirt, something black. And if they, if they're aggressive, they're going to come around and they're going to swarm right at it. Well, guess what? The very first hive I did it to, which I thought was the hive, they swarmed it. And it was, like I said, I mean, these guys were aggressive. I was fully covered. I had my Carhartt pants on, I had gloves on, DeWalt work gloves, and they stung me through my gloves. So I said, okay, great. Now, Bill, what he did is he walked me through the procedure on what to do. And my dad and I did this. Basically, it's take the hive, move it away, move it like 10 or 20 feet away, and then take a shell of a hive and put it back to where that original hive was. And what he told me to do was to shake all the bees out, either one on a cloth, like a bedspread. I shook it out on 2 series of cardboard, and I made a ramp back into the original hive. So I shook all the bees out, and in the process, these guys were still stinging me. I think I got stung 20 times in my hand while I was doing this activity, and they would not stop. They would not leave my dad and I alone. So after we shook out all the bees, we reassembled the hive. We kind of stepped back and let the bees settle down, so to speak. And the foragers, the field force, as Bill says, the field force went back to where the original hive was. I waited. Bill, you called me up about what, 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and my dad and I started this at about 7 a.m. that morning. And they were still flying, right? They were still coming and going from where I shook the bees out to where the old box or the original hive was. I waited probably till about 2:30, 3 o'clock, sealed the hive up, and drove 12 miles into East Granby and let them go in the woods. And I literally stayed in the woods with them for about 45 minutes because they were still aggressive. I eventually collected all my, all the equipment that I brought them in, and walked away. And at this point, knock on wood, I haven't had any issues. I went in the back, turned my mower on right behind the hive, turned my mower on, put the blade, the mowing deck on, and no issues whatsoever. I went down there today in shorts, a t-shirt, walked around the bee yard, no issue whatsoever. So knock on wood, they were taken care of based on the advice that Bill had given me.
Out there, it's not fun to have that kind of colony in your bee yard. Yeah, it's not fun at all. I mean, it just ruins your experience. But what you manage to do with that is save the nurse bees and the brood. And what you're counting on now it might come out, the bees that emerge out of there their temperament might change, but in the meantime you solve the problem because people are having picnics around you and everything on the weekend. And if it goes back to being a little bit more defensive, you still have plenty of time before that'll happen, 2 or 3 weeks maybe. Yeah. And then if it does happen, then you do it again or get rid of the hive in general. Anyway, so I wanted you to share that. So, so that other people that are in that situation realize that there is a solution where you can save part of the hive and get rid of the aggressive foragers. Now, of course, it's going to set the hive back quite a bit, right? But it's not a total loss. A saltwater pool or chlorine-based pool, it's got a very distinct odor. I mean, if someone, you swim in a chlorine pool and you get it right away. And so when people are swimming in it, they're aerosolizing the chlorine molecules, and that spreads out an aroma blanket over the area. Novelty water foragers coming out of your colony will find that, and because it has a salt content to it also, chlorine part, right? It's got a salt base. And if it's a saltwater pool, it's salt already. All right, so people will say, well, how do I get rid of your bees? And all of these ideas about putting kiddie pools aside and filling it with pool water and all. It just seems like none of those work. And it's just a hard thing to deal with. So if some of you are working with that, the only thing that I have heard and never tested is to put up a sprinkler. Now, I don't know how that would actually work, but if you had a sprinkler, I've heard that if you have a sprinkler going while everybody's in the pool, the bees can't fly with the water coming down from the sky. And I don't know how it would work. I really don't, but I hear people say that part works. Anyway, outside of that, I don't have an answer. Bees only build wax when they want to, and they'll tell you when they want to by producing a bunch of like light or frost wax. There's other names for it in other parts of the world, but basically it's a sign that they have lost the space that they had in their hive is all filled, and they need more space to do that. Now, that sign you might not have picked up on, but what is important for you to understand is that bees define the space that they're in by the band of honey that's over their head. So if in the top box where you have your brood or whatever's going on in there, and then you have a queen excluder and a super, is that what you said, Tom?
Yeah, I have yes,
super.
two brood, and
yeah, queen
the
excluder
super on top. But
right.
I don't have a queen excluder because I'm trying to get them to draw out the.
Yeah. Well, they'll draw out comb through a queen excluder. That's not a problem.
Okay.
If they want to, or if they're in the mood to do that.
Yeah.
But if there's a band of honey in those frames in the top box, that is for all practical purposes the outer boundaries of that colony's hive biologically, and that's how they're going to look at it. That's not something that they're going to cross to put up to build out supers for you. You have to have a clear passageway for them to move through the top brood box and into the super.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen if they'll draw that super out this year. I don't know if they will or not. I mean, they might be perfectly satisfied with what they have in the brood nest down there and have no need to store anything else. The only thing that might encourage them to build comb out in the super is whether or not that we get a fall flow or something happens where, there's lots of nectar coming in. I don't know where you read about checkerboarding. I would have probably said that's probably not a good idea to ever do inside of a bee colony, because especially in the brood nest, if you want to get supers drawn, sometimes you can checkerboard, drawn combs with a foundation. You get a little bit of activity that way and get nice straight comb out of it.
Yeah.
For the most part, in the brood nest, it's not something that occurs naturally with bees, and it's totally disturbing to their natural biology. So you have eggs in cups.
Yes, I do, Bill. Yes.
They're going to swarm. Yeah, so they're going to swarm. That's what's going to happen at this point. All right, so you got to take action at this point. If you want to keep them from swarming, or if you want to let them swarm, you can let them swarm too. But if you're in an area where that swarm might be a little bit invasive to other people, or agitating to other people around, you might want to keep them from swarming. And the way you can do it is get a nuke box if you have one. Take out 2 frames of brood out of that colony, and then a frame of resources. Try to find something with pollen in it, and then take some of that wet nectar. That's your 4th frame.
Yes.
And then a frame of foundation. But what I'm gonna suggest you do now, you're gonna put like 5 frames back into your colony.
Yes.
But they're gonna be empty.
Yes.
All right. So so what you want to do is you find a queen in your colony.
Yes.
All right. And then put her in the nuke.
Yes.
All right. So you want your laying queen in the nuke. This is referred to as a strong side split. Yeah. And the reason for it is that all the population that's capable of raising a new queen successfully will be in the other colony.
Yes.
And you will have the laying queen, which you're about to lose, right, will be in that nuke, and she won't swarm out of there.
Yeah, hive that's attempting to swarm. So I'll be just dropping in foundation, basically, no drawn combs. And so that,
right, you're going to be putting in foundation.
And so is that going to be an issue?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, so it's not the best thing in the world, but
I know.
That's where you're at.
All
You
right,
know,
I
make sure
understand.
that-
I
Yeah,
understand.
make sure
Yes.
make sure that foundation is waxed up good, before
Yes.
you put it in there, and then yeah, see what they do with it. So what's going to happen if this works out for you, and there's no guarantee for anything in bees, but if this works out for you, you'll have saved your queen. And what'll happen in the colony, you got to leave some eggs in your colony,
Yes, I understand that. Yes, I
right?
understand. Yeah.
You can reduce that down to one box
Yes.
if you can do that, right? So examine the structure of that box, how the brood's laid out, and
Yes.
you might be able to get that down into one box. Get down to one box and has some eggs in it, they'll make emergency cells, and they will. Or they have queen cups, leave those cups.
Yeah.
By the way, yeah, leave those cups in that colony.
Would I let it go a little bit, maybe let the cups develop a little bit more before I do the split bill, or?
But no, maybe you can, but then you're dealing with, a larger cell that can be damaged when you're moving frames around. So if you
Okay.
got it at the cup stage, you're fine, as long as there's eggs in there. So your goal, in my opinion, would be to try to get that thing down to one box, because you're going to take 5 frames out, and you might have, if you have solid frames of nectar, you can also spin them out. But if you don't have any facilities to do that, but still, so get it to a minimum configuration. Put that super back on top, let them make another queen, and you'll have your queen in your nuke. If
Okay.
it's not successful, you can put her back in. Peppermint oil thing about small hive beetle is not technically legal to do, so I wouldn't suggest it. I don't know if it works or not. I doubt it does. The only way that you can get control your small hive beetles at this point is to trap them. I'm going to just answer this other question about formic acid. Let's read this. And Deborah, do you want to ask your question?
It's actually,
got it in the chat.
it's actually Joe.
Okay, Joe.
I know.
Fire
Yeah,
away.
I put Formic in my hives at the beginning, Monday, at the beginning of the week. 1 pad for the 10-day, and
Okay.
then replace it at the 10-day.
Yeah.
The temperature's been great, but next week, when it's time to replace the first pad, we're going to be in the middle of 95-degree heat wave.
Yeah.
Should I just leave it alone
Yes.
until it temperature breaks?
Yeah, you should wait, because you'll kill too much brood. They'll be uncapping drones, and it'll be a mess. And you'll drive them all outside the colony into the heat too. So I would wait a little bit.
Leave it alone until the temperature.
It won't, that's the problem with that particular technique. You gotta like look 20 days in advance, not just 10. And
Right.
and we don't have that good forecasting, so you really can't tell.
Yeah, I didn't want to use 2 pads per hive
Right.
because I didn't want to stress them out.
No, I mean, we could hook like this with the temperature limits of formic acid all the time. So yeah, wait a little bit. It looks like, we're going to be fine. Remember, with the 10-day treatment, that the first 3 days are the most intense sublimation of the chemical. So
Right,
it
and the
can be
first 3
warmer
days.
at the end.
Okay,
I mean, so it's not like you didn't do anything. So wait a little bit, put the pad on again when we have more more moderate temperatures.
funky comb. What's
Foundation.
going on there?
Well, did you just put it right in the colony
Well,
from the box?
back in April, I put this
Yeah.
is a deep, and
How old was it? How old was that foundation when you put it in?
Oh, brand new.
Okay.
It's brand new.
So what I'm finding is that if you don't do anything to supplement the wax they put on that frame from the factory,
Okay, yeah.
you can get, there's more of this that occurs than if you actually wax it down. Now,
Has
on
anybody
my
seen
place,
this before?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, I got some of that in my colonies.
Okay,
I was rushed into dumping in some black foundation in 3 or 4 colonies, and little nukes and stuff that I'm raising have that comb configuration. Now, I don't normally put that in without painting it.
okay,
So
okay.
Mondo, did you have any problem with wacky comb after you painted all your foundation with wax?
I didn't have any problems, but if you just keep it with no wax at all, they build all that wonky comb.
Yeah. So yeah. So
Gotcha.
I'm suggesting everybody who So that, let's say that frame was made a while back, they sprayed some wax on it. I don't know what they actually put on it. They put beeswax on it, I'm sure. It's a really, really light coating, and and bees sometimes don't get it. They don't know what it is. And so what they do is they just then build that crazy comb out. And because there's a lot of space between the frames, because you have foundation next to foundation,
Right.
they can do what they want. They went nuts. Scrape it off and start over, Joe.
Oh,
Okay.
no, it actually leveled out.
What did it do?
It became good looking comb. It leveled out. The whole frame became covered with comb.
Well, okay, so now, all right, so you don't have a problem then.
Well, we have other problems.
Yeah, but the thing is to wax the frames. Really
Yeah,
good.
wax those frames and you'll get a good start with them. The thing is to melt wax. I use a one of those cheap bristle brushes. I have an old deep fryer, and
Oh,
Yeah.
and I put in an aluminum pot in it and throw some wax in it, and then you could just brush the wax right on.
oh, that's cool.
That I didn't do that.
Good idea.
That's good to know.
Try it next time and see what kind of results you get. Now, I thought when I saw that, I didn't take a good look at it, Joe. I'm sorry about that. But if the cells are being built off the foundation, right, and they're being built the right way, then that's one thing. But a lot of times they build it between, like bridge comb, between the two frames, and you get vertical comb, and that won't work.
To tell them that wasn't the proper way to draw out a frame.
Yeah, I know.
but
Yeah,
they
that's
wouldn't
great.
listen to me.
Glad you did that.
That's
Yeah.
good, that's
So
good.
no, that's actually the proper way to draw a comb, except some of the cells are sideways. You see it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's bad. That's the bad part. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you bringing that up. That's a problem with plastic foundation, especially black.
I've been keeping bees for about 8 years. I'm having this problem, which I've never seen before.
Yeah.
And I've never, as far as I know, had any pesticide issue. I am on that list. But just before May 19th, I had noticed that one of my hives was a little sluggish. And this was a package I had started last year, and it was really booming with bees. But I started to notice like bees dying in front of the hive or being dragged out, and they were making a little pile, but their tongues were sticking out. So I thought
Yeah.
maybe it is pesticide. I don't know. And then I was reading about bee paralysis.
I
They
hear-
are a little greasy and they
All right.
quiver.
So that's chronic bee paralysis virus. So that's what it is. So if they
Okay.
look a little greasy, now what we used to think, back in the day, bee lore is always a little damaging to the actual experience of beekeeping.
Mhm.
But you would learn, 20 years ago, you would learn that those are old robber bees, and the bees that they're trying to robbing bees, and they're going in and robbing other colonies, and the colonies are pulling their hairs off. But that's not what's happening. Chronic bee paralysis virus affects the CT on bees, and it breaks off. And also inside the colony, bees will chase them around and chew them. It takes its toll on colonies, because what ends up happening is, it affects the population of bees.
Mhm.
And it's terrible. I hate it. And there's no cure for it. It's a viral infection. It can spread in your apiary. It doesn't last forever, but I've had seasons with it where it's taken out a part of my apiary. Where
Do you usually do something like get rid of those hives?
I try not to spread it around. And and so one thing you did, which I commend you for, was trying to start a new nuke, but you also brought that viral infection over into that nuke. So look over
Yeah,
there.
I
Just
thought
look
that
over
could
there.
happen.
Yeah, look over there and see if you end up with those little black bees again and all that. So, but this will go away.
Okay.
Right? So the viral infection, it can affect your colony and you can lose them. I have lost the colonies to chronic bee paralysis virus, but that's a very extreme time. It won't, this colony, don't expect anything from it this year.
Yeah, I have a super up on it just to give them some more room, and there's nothing in there. And I
Yeah,
just
I mean, yeah,
put
but
it to give more
yeah,
room, because
right.
they say that they pass it from bee to bee.
Well, yeah,
At least that's what I.
yeah. Well, so you're right. So even bees, bees are, feeding each other and grooming each other and doing all of that, and the virus particles are coming out of them, coming out of their proboscis or in their excrement, and they're passing it around, right? So the virions, which are the actual particles that are infectious, have to then enter the cells of those bees and they have to germinate inside cells of bees, and it kills the cells inside the bees. That's what's a problem. And eventually you'll see them dead on the outside.
Like, let's say that hive died out. How, like, should I get rid of that equipment, or with
No,
a couple months it would?
yeah. So you're
Okay.
asking a question. Will it be, what we struggle with in all viral and bacterial infections is whether or not the pathogen can actually live on what we call fomats, which in a colony would be the frames and the cells and all that. We have no evidence that chronic bee paralysis viruses are the virions are unstable environmentally. The particles that can infect bees. So I have no knowledge to say, hey, yes, either way, but I've used my combs over after infections from chronic bee paralysis virus, and they were fine.
Yeah.
Any sporulating bacterial infection, the comb is contaminated. But with viral infections, we don't know anything about, and it doesn't seem to be a problem reusing the combs. The accumulation of pollen in a colony should be balanced by the amount of brood that's in the colony. So that's the way it should work, and that's the way we have studied the science, and that's how we think it works, but it doesn't always work that way.
Right.
So sometimes there's an excess of pollen, and there's a bunch of pollen foragers going out and getting it, and they're missing the E-beta osamine signal, which is the pheromone that comes out of brood that signals to the colony that there's a lot of brood to feed. So go out there and get pollen, right? So it should work. It should balance. But in the case where it doesn't, there's sometimes, if this happens in the fall, by the way, let me back up again, then there's a queen issue. If it happens in the spring, put those frames away for making splits, and take, if they really have, because pollen's tough for bees to move around, and they'll just chew it out of cells and throw it away. But if it gets into an overwinters, becomes old pollen, it's not bee bred, then they won't store it. Did they store it as bee bred, Adam, or as just raw pollen?
It's stored as bee bred.
Okay, you got great frames there then. If you don't need them, if they have that wonderful energy interface where there's brood and then pollen and open nectar and then capped honey, just a classic frame, you don't need it. You don't need all of that bee bread. Take a frame or two of it out and put it in the freezer, and keep it for nukes, and make some splits with it. You know what to do with it. Two comments I wrote in my notes, that when you do transfer a swarm cell to another box, if you want to do that to try to have them make another queen, make certain that you handle that queen cell very gingerly. And if it's old, if it's in its 13th day or 14th day, that's when the wings are formed on the queen, and it can't really be moved or jostled around much at all. It has to always be kept stable. The best queen cells to move, the most durable ones, are earlier than their final capping stage. So you can tell a mature swarm cell by the color of the cap. What happens is when the cell matures, bees are going to help that queen get out. So the first thing they do is they remove the wax that's on top of her cocoon. And so the cell takes on a two-tone. The cap is darker because you're looking at a cocoon. Then there's the nice light peanut cell below it. So that's the way you can tell. Look up mature queen cells, study that. You'll see them in your own colony if your things are swarming. So earlier on, it's easier for you to move a swarm cell and not damage it. Ankle biters was a word that somebody talked about, as they bought a nuke, I think, and they had ankle biter queens. That's a queen that was bred for allo grooming of varroa. So you could find these in your own yards if you want to, if you have a microscope or a little loop. a coin loop. You can pick up varroa that get on a drop board, and you can bring them inside, take a look at them, and see if there's leg parts missing out of them. You can find natural ankle biters in your own colonies, and those are the queens that you want to breed from if you like that particular grooming characteristic. It's a way to control varroa naturally. And then he bred queens from them, and he got a line of ankle biter queens that they sell at this point, which is a grooming technique. And there's supposed to be some varroa control. It works sometimes it doesn't. So I wouldn't put too much stock in it. Africanized bees are different than what Gary was describing. If you're talking about
Gary's problem.
Yeah, Gary's problem wasn't Africanized bees. They were just defensive.
I was
Right, so-
wondering if any climate factors might fit into the Africanized bees actually migrating up the East Coast.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and it's possible. I'm guaranteed, so there's a part in South America where there's no Africanized bees. And there's a part in North America where there's no Africanized bees because they can't manage the winter piece of it. But Gio's bringing up a good point. We'll figure that out. I'm guessing that there's an absolute possibility that we will find pockets of Africanized bees up here in Northeast eventually. But now I happen to watch some of these channels where people cut out bees down in New Orleans. They are bees that are just as calm as the bees that are here in Connecticut, and he's in New Orleans. And if there's going to be Africanized bees, and I know there are in those areas, and he doesn't show colonies, I don't think, with Africanized bees, but there are some bees that he shows that are very, very defensive. Gary's hive was very defensive. I doubt that it was an Africanized colony. But will we see them in the future? I would imagine we might see more. I'm getting indications from Victoria, who is our state entomologist, Victoria Smith. You can write her an email and ask her what's going on with the state apiary inspectors. They're not paying a lot of money, and they want a lot of qualifications. They want somebody who has experience and has a degree in biology, and they want to pay, a minimal salary. So it's going to be hard to find somebody, and then they have to come on board. So I doubt if we'll see an inspector come on this year. If they do, it'll be later on. Why not use a Boardman field with water to feed your bees? You can use Boardman feeders for water. It's not a problem, but it won't stop the novelty foragers from leaving that colony and going out to a pool. All right. Now, I know somebody who is a good friend of Tom Seeley, and whenever we were at these events, Tom and I and my friend would spend plenty of time talking about bees and have a lot of fun with it. And I asked him this question about Boardman feeders, and I mentioned the pool scenario and said, why is it that I even can put pool water in the Boardman feeders and it doesn't stop the foragers from going out and getting water from the pool? And the answer he gave me was obvious and simple. The bees that take water from a Boardman feeder are not foragers. It's a different bee. The bees that go out and forage for water for the colony are looking for the mineral salt also, and they won't stop. They're not going to the Boardman feeder, they're going out to the water source. So it's a different bee that uses a Boardman feeder, and that's why that technique doesn't stop them from going to pools. When an insect like a spotted lanternfly or an aphid eats what it eats on a plant, it exudes the carbohydrates because it doesn't need them. So that semi-sweet excrement that comes out of spotted lanternflies or aphids is collected by bees, especially if there's a little dearth. But aphids, even though you may not know it, they're prolific in all over in the environment, and especially on black locust trees. They just have a tendency to love black locusts, and they go on them. Spotted lanternflies, which we'll see as time goes on, more of a infestation. Their tree is
Tree of heaven.
Tree of heaven, right? The tree of heaven is what they go for, and they just live there. But spotted lanternfly isn't. It's not only the tree of heaven that they love. They'll go on to anything. right? So, and eat almost everything, including in vineyards and all that. So it really affects the taste of honey, in my opinion. I tasted pure lanternfly honey and I almost spit it out. It's a matter of preference. Other people say, oh yeah, no, I like it. And I wouldn't even give it to my customers because it just it tastes rusty and it tastes a little bit bitter. I just don't like it. So I think it's going to be a problem. Yeah, I mean, they're all over the place. I mean, the interesting part about, and no other insect does this, but spotted lanternflies will lay an egg mass on anything. So they'll lay them on trees, but they'll also lay them on the sides of trucks, in the wheel wells of cars, and on railroad trains. And that's how they have this successful propagation or migration. I mean, that's how they spread. The egg mass becomes mobile. No other insect actually does that. They'll lay their egg mass on something and it stays there. Like, milkweed is the host plant for monarch butterflies. It lays an egg and it stays there. Lots of other native pollinators lay eggs inside of holes in grounds and it stays there. Spotted lanternflies, their egg mass can be on anything. It can be on your bicycle. So, and then you move it to someplace else. So it's good to identify that egg mass. I think some of those signs show it to you. And if you see some, just scrape it off. So listen, thank you so much for coming tonight. I thought it was a great talk. I'm so glad folks made contributions this evening, and everybody who asked the question, I really thank you. There are valuable questions. They're important questions. And I'm glad that it happened, that you made that contribution. I also want to encourage you to look at our website and look at the events. We have some guest speakers coming up. Now, for June and July, we don't have any guest speakers, but then at the end of the year, we have some surprises for you, including Tom Seeley in December. So I hope you register for those events, and also look at that extraction event. If you've got a super hanging around, you just want to come to our location, the Carriage House in New Haven, and just socialize with other beekeepers, or see how extraction's done, see how moisture content is measured, and how hot knives work and all of that, and then we'll just come around and talk, get together. Cool. All right. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to